Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Crash and I've been working on this video in isolation. No, not from the real world but from social media, because I've been working in this video in a limbo between the No Way Home's release date and the day I could finally see it. The hype for this movie is real and I've been a Spider-Man fan since I remember. I have this thing since I was 13, which is kinda old now that I think about it. And since I was already in a Spider-Man mood, I thought I could give the Spider-Man manga a go. Yes, there is a Spider-Man manga. Actually, there's more than one, but today we're gonna be talking about two of them, starting with the very first one. Simply called Spider-Man, though sometimes known as Spider-Man the manga, this manga debuted in Weekly Shonen Jump in January of 1970, a mere 8 years after the original Spider-Man first appeared in Amazing Fantasy. While 8 years may seem like a lot, in Spider-Man's history, it's not. For reference, this manga came out 31 years before Tobey Maguire's first Spider-Man movie, and it's then 51 years old by now. Most of Spider-Man's most iconic moments, storylines were yet to happen. The infamous death of Gwen Stacy, for example, will only happen 3 years later, and of course the iconic Venom will be decades away from its proper debut. The Clone Saga was not a thing, and well, most Spider-Man runs statistically happened after the Spider-Man manga had finished. That's mostly my point. This manga was drawn by Ryuichi Ikegami, would eventually draw manga like Crying Freeman and Sanctuary. And while the art of the manga is pretty decent for the standards of the time, and it does improve as it goes on, this is still Ikegami at early stages of his career, so don't expect the art to be on the same level as in Sanctuary, as that would only be released 20 years later. The story itself was written by Kazumasa Irai, although Wikipedia claims that the manga was originally written by Kosei Ono, and only after the first 6 storylines does Irai take over. While I couldn't find any confirmation of this, I'm willing to believe it, as I think you can see this change in the manga itself. Well, it's not like the manga completely shifts tones or anything. You can see how it moves away from the American Spider-Man mythos from the second volume onwards. The first chapter of the second volume, and the 5th overall, sees the final time a traditional Spider-Man villain appears. From there on out, the manga starts focusing more on unique villains to the manga, but we'll tackle if that's good or bad in a little bit. For now, let's go back and start from chapter 1. Our first difference between this manga and the normal Spider-Man starts from its very first page. Peter Parker is nowhere to be seen, and instead our main character is a Japanese student by the name of Yu Komori. Difference in name and nationality aside, Komori serves very much as an alternative Peter Parker. He is a gifted high school student who's often ignored or made fun by his fellow classmates. One day, while studying some formulas about radioactivity, he ends up being bitten by a spider. Now, honestly, this is my biggest problem with the manga. Not that he got bitten by a spider, I'd be mad if that didn't happen. Rather, the fact that this is literally the introduction to the manga. There's no build-up, there's no meeting Komori before this event, and worse, there's barely any explanation to where the spider actually came from and why it gave Komori spider powers. Which it does because this is Spider-Man. Other than some talk about Komori studying formulas and the spider absorbing radioactivity, this is a topic that is largely left untouched in the manga. Everything up to Komori turning into Spider-Man happens pretty fast. Now, it's been some years since I read the original Amazing Fantasy number 15 comics to tell you how much better or worse that handles Peter's evolution, but as a story, I'm not a big fan of this fast pacing. Thankfully, from here on out, this manga is, in one word, amazing. To me, what makes this manga so good is the journey our main character goes through and how each and every single villain complements the arc. One of the things I find hard in superhero comic books is that they end up having lots and lots of villains, and some of them serve as villains for multiple characters. So it's hard for all of them to complement the main character. This is also the case for pretty much anything, including anime and manga that uses a monster of the week format, which Spider-Man very much uses. Some of the villains will be important and have an interesting relationship with the character, and others will serve more as a filler. But with this manga, it seems that most, if not all, villains were carefully thought out to bring something to the story and to Spider-Man. Think no further than the very first chapter, where Spider-Man tries to catch Electro to get a reward so he can give money to help his girlfriend's mother, not realizing that Electro just happens to be his girlfriend's brother. This whole story serves as an alternative to the Uncle Ben storyline, where Komori first uses his powers for his own personal reasons, ends up causing harm to his loved ones. While it's not really as impactful, I think it does the job well, especially because instead of becoming superhero, the actions make Komori adopt his abilities instead, and swears to not use his powers anymore. I think this is our main difference here. Spider-Man is often seen helping normal people from normal thugs, overall using his powers for good whenever he can, as that's his responsibility. But Komori sees that differently. He often sees himself in the supervillains who also have extraordinary powers, and he gets to experience firsthand how those powers corrupt them, so he avoids using them unless the situation calls for it, as he feels that's the more responsible way to use them. This kinda serves as a reason as to why we see less of Spider-Man in the later half of the manga. Komori tends to try to not use his powers, especially when the bad guys are just normal humans, and he tends to only grab the suit and swing around the final instances of the chapters. There's a chapter where he gets abducted by a gang trying to rob a politician, and a full chapter of him just being dragged around by a maniac dude with a gun, and for the majority of it, he just lets them have their way. This may be sad for anyone who really wants to see Spider-Man as Spider-Man and not just as some dude, but it definitely makes sense within his character. In this way, we get to have the most interesting and best thing this manga has going for it. It's villains. In my personal favorite chapter, we see Komori being saved, quote-unquote, from being beaten by a gang by a classmate of his who seems to have a lot of influence in that place. Throughout this chapter, Komori and his classmates slowly become friendlier and friendlier as he brings Komori to the world of sex, drugs, and alcohol. Komori trying both to push his new friend away from this life, while at the same time trying his own best to resist the temptation of being consumed by the lifestyle. This is a really fantastic story told across around 200 pages that really shows how good this manga actually is on its own, separate from the more traditional Spider-Man mythos. There's this air of tragedy across most stories in this manga. Darker tone as everyone struggles to find their goodness and often fail. Spider-Man does not save everyone. Especially the villains have a big habit of dying upon their encounter. Spider-Man realizing that he can't save them, and sometimes can barely save himself. I urge everyone that loves manga and Spider-Man to give this one a try. But if you are the person who prefers a more traditional Spider-Man story, then I have the thing just for you, because surprise, I have another Spider-Man manga I want to talk about. Spider-Man Fake Red is a more recent release, being released in 2019 by mangaka Yusuke Osawa. Now, Fake Red is actually based on the more traditional Spider-Man canon, meaning that in this world Spider-Man is Peter Parker, a boy from Queens who got bitten by a spider, and yada yada yada. And I just want to bring this quickly, but this manga was actually cancelled due to poor sales and only lasted a volume. However, I would never recommend a manga to you if I thought it felt incomplete. And Fake Red feels very much like a complete manga with a very satisfying ending. Is it short? Yes, but I think it works as a one-volume long story. The main character of Fake Red is actually not Peter Parker, and instead is a Japanese student in New York by the name of Yu Honomai. And I love this name, because one, it's an homage to the Spider-Man of the previous manga, Yu Komori, and because this manga is all about the idea that you, the reader, don't need powers to be Spider-Man. What do I mean by this? Well, the story starts with you finding a Spider-Man suit in the street. He takes it home because he loves Spider-Man and the suit is very well made. But when he finds out that this suit can shoot webs, he realizes that this isn't just a Spider-Man suit, but the Spider-Man suit. He decides to try it out just for the hell of it and gets confused as a real Spider-Man as a fire happens in a nearby house and a child is stuck inside. Despite not being the real one, the pleas of help by the people around him convinces him to actually go and save the kid despite not having any kinds of powers. At the end of the chapter, he realizes that the real Spider-Man is missing for a while. The bulk of this manga is you taking over Spider-Man and even facing some of Spider-Man's most famous villains like Rhino and Screwball, and how he manages to find ways to save people around him without having powers. And I think it works fantastically well with the message that Marvel and so many others try to deliver, the idea that everyone could be Spider-Man, that's the point of the mask, that it could fit anyone. A lot of Spider-Man exists, Peter Parker and not Peter Parker, that's why Spider-Verse is a thing. But Yu is one of the few, if not the only one, who does not have powers, who feels every punch, every wall smash to his core like we would. The only one who acts like a normal human being behind the mask. He's not like Batman or Iron Man, he's more like Kick-Ass. And I think that's a fantastic way to go at it. And that's why I also really like this story, short as it may be. So yeah, if you are in the mood for more Spider-Man after or before No Way Home, I definitely think these two are great reads. And if you somehow reach here and are thinking, real cool dude, but I love Spider-Man but I actually have no idea what a manga is, then I do have a video on that. It's the one on the left. And if you watched it till here, thank you very much, and I'll see you next video.